We start with Tuesday's primary. The Arizona Republican Party now firmly in Donald Trump's grip. The state's first election since 2020 was marred by a fiasco that led to the firing of a county elections director. Joining us to break it all down are Stacey Barchenger. She covers the governor's race for the Arizona Republic, and Rachel Leingang of the Arizona Agenda. Rachel also reports on elections issues for VoteBeat. That provides nonpartisan reporting on elections and voting. So welcome back to Square Off. Welcome to Square Off, Stacey.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. First time.
Yeah.
The primary started as a litmus test of Donald Trump's hold on Arizona Republicans. What does this primary tell us about the strength of his endorsement?
All of his candidates won. He's got the grip. It's still very strong and still very powerful in Arizona politics.
And how big was it? Well, let me put it this way. How big was it for Kari Lake getting that endorsement, which she got quite a while ago?
Yeah, last September. So she has had the endorsement in her pocket for months and months. It was a centerpiece of her campaign. Even beyond the endorsement, she ran a Trump-esque campaign sort of in style. It's a close race. You have to say that it counted and helped put her over the top.
Now, Lake did have name recognition going for her, right? 25 years in the Phoenix TV market. But Karen Taylor Robeson, a real estate development consultant, had a huge financial advantage. She spent $15 million of her own money. Why couldn't that break through?
Well, yeah, I mean, she spent $15 million, and that's all we know about so far. It's likely a higher number because the reporting hasn't caught up with the election date. But, I mean, Kari is a charismatic candidate. She's very well known. She has blanketed the state, going to the outside counties where she wasn't already known in the television market. And Trump came here for her. He put out multiple statements in support of her. He campaigned for her. That really matters.
But we have to mention she's also not your typical candidate, nor is this a typical slate. These are all people who embrace the lie that the election was stolen.
Yes, they very much do. And going towards November, we're looking at a chief election denier in Kari Lake, who has raised questions even about the cycle so far, getting into August, against Katie Hobbs, who has been the chief defender of how that election was carried out.
That will be fascinating. Rachel, I want to go to you, and Stacey, feel free to chime in. There was a huge vote swing in this race. Kari Lake went from 9 points down after the first vote drop on election night to 3 points up, and probably increasing that lead. Most people would think that was suspicious, especially people who follow Kari Lake. What happened? What explains that?
I think it really shows how people are voting and the way that they've changed how they vote. For people who are skeptical of the election, who are very likely to support Kari Lake, they voted in person on election day, and their votes are just being counted. So, or they dropped off their ballots not trusting mail or drop boxes, which were subject of all sorts of, theories. So I think it just shows whatever patterns we knew before about how people vote, they're totally upended now.
Yeah, I think it's called the Trump surge, right? We saw something like this in 2020 as well, when Joe Biden built up a big lead on election night and Trump slowly chipped away. Now let's get to this election fiasco. Happened in real time in Pinal County. What did happen and what was the impact?
So this was the second error, major error, I would say, in that county. A few weeks ago, they left off town elections on seven communities, and that was a pretty big problem on its own for 60,000 ballots. And then, this week they ran out of ballots in more than 20 precincts, potentially hundreds of voters disenfranchised per the county's own estimates. It's hard to, if even one person doesn't get to vote, that's a problem. Hundreds is a huge issue.
Is there any wrongdoing here, or was it just plain old they screwed up?
From everything we've seen so far, it doesn't seem like there was anything nefarious. The county attorney had said if there was, he would have perp walked someone out and had them take the fall. What happened is we have a new elections director who came into the office in March with one employee. He's since staffed up, but
He had one employee?
He had one employee.
To run an election?
Yes, but then, since March until now, he added more people, but you got to imagine then that almost all of them are new. And so it's just a really difficult situation. We've seen a lot of the harassment toward election officials. It results in people not wanting to have these jobs. So,
Is this a sign of things to come as we see more turnover? We've seen it here in Arizona.
This is, when I've talked with elections experts, they have said that. They've said that, there's obviously the threat of insiders who don't believe in elections coming in and wanting to subvert results. There's also the threat of people not knowing how to run elections. Huge learning curve, highly technical job. It results in errors, more than likely.
And it's interesting to me, Stacey, that Kari Lake and others on the Republican side were sending very mixed messages about the vote. It's rigged, but put your ballot in the mail.
Yeah, I mean, so even in the course of 10 days, we had Kari Lake saying she had detected some stealing going on, and then she declared victory before her race was called and pointed to these issues in Pinal County as problematic. And when we pressed her for answers about, that's not fraud, it's a problem, but it's not fraud, that's all they're pointing to. It's an open question if we hear any more, I think, about, well, we certainly will hear more about fraud from Kari Lake, but what becomes of these allegations that she's made?
Nothing, right? No, she has a pending lawsuit. She and Mark Fincham have a pending lawsuit in federal court wanting a judge to throw out the counting machines that counted the ballots that delivered them to victory, because they're broken machines, they're bad machines. But she's accepting her victory. She declared victory twice.
Yes,
right?
She did, yes.
What is your sense, I'll start with you, of how reporters, we can cover this, the way this disinformation and lies about the election over the next 3 months?
I think there's a level of accountability that every statement needs to have, that people who deny the election results from 2020, it should be fact-checked, obviously, but I don't know to what degree that matters to those folks. Obviously, they're still believing, all of the information. For things like comparing what happened in Pinal County to all of these different things, I think we need to take seriously that there were people who weren't able to vote. That is a true thing. That happened. But it doesn't relate to any of these other things. So when we're speaking about it, I think not kind of blurring the lines of reality and irreality is really helpful.
And there also may be a mushrooming pen scandal, which...
Oh, every year.
Smeared ink or something. You interviewed Stephen Richer, who handles early voting here in Maricopa County, his first election since being elected in 2020. How's he doing?
He keeps a good sense of humor despite it all. I think for most of us, that level of harassment wouldn't be surmountable. I don't know that I would keep that job. But I think he's weathered every sort of bump that you can think of and is still cracking jokes and, feels he's doing the right thing. Yeah. And that's what's keeping him in his office.
And I want to get Katie Hobbs into this conversation, sure. The Democratic nominee. How do you think she'll go at Kari Lake in the general election?
I think we maybe saw some signals in her statement after Kari was declared the Republican nominee yesterday. Katie says this is a race between sanity and chaos, and I suspect you will see her portray herself as the stable voice, the stable candidate going forward, when Kari Lake is kind of all over the place.
So interesting. One thing we do know, Arizona will have its 5th female governor next January. Quite an accomplishment. Stacey, Barchenger, Rachel Leingang, thank you so much for joining us.